I had just reached the top of the 11th Street hill when I saw it. The most beautiful piece of furniture I had ever seen in my life. Now, I don't know how many of you wake up each morning excited to check the Craigslist free section. I knew you were out there. But I am that person. So the thought of just stumbling upon high-quality street furniture completely by chance just felt too good to be true. But there it was, standing before me, its broad shoulders squared in my direction. A dresser. A blue dresser. A dresser the color of aquamarine or robin's egg blue, if Crayola is your point of reference. My housemates can attest to my obsession with household improvement projects. I just love the process of curating my own space, mixing style with functionality. But at this point, it was far less frivolous than that. I was new to DC. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of an otherwise pretty empty bedroom, my books piled high in one corner, my clothes in another, and I wanted so desperately to feel like an organized adult. Instead, I felt like my scattered belongings were how I felt about my life, working part-time from home and full-time on finding my place in a new city. When the light turned green, I was too distracted by the glow of the dresser to continue home. So I crossed the street to assess the situation. It was just as beautiful up close. I was looking at its little embellishments when the owner stumbled out of his house, precariously balancing what looked to be all of his belongings in his arms, and with an expression on his face that can only be described as moving day. I got his attention, and when I asked if it was free, he said, without skipping a beat, yeah, if you can move it, it's yours, but it's heavy. So I looked at the dresser, I looked at my bike, I looked at my biceps, and I thought, this is totally doable. So only a moment later, he ran back out of his house again and handed me a sign that said, "Do not touch," in big letters. I appreciated the gesture, but I just couldn't risk leaving the dresser there with only the sign to protect it. So I decided to pop a squat directly on top of the dresser to figure out a plan. People walked by and I waved like I would if I were on a park bench, only with more storage under my butt. And I tried to devise a plan. I proceeded to text all of my friends and acquaintances and Craigslist users that would listen to my plea for a way to move this monstrosity. Responses started to come in, hey, sorry, I'm at work. That's fair, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Or waiting on Comcast to fix my internet. They can use my internet. So this was a high traffic area, and there was a steady stream of people walking by still. They'd look at me with those, "That's beautiful" eyes, and I'd look back with those hands off, it's mine eyes. Until suddenly a SUV with a shattered back window screeched to a stop in front of me. 2 little girls, probably about 7 and 8 years old, jumped out of the car and started rummaging through all of the items that had now formed a semicircle around the dresser. And their mom got out after them. They started loading in a collection of items to their car until the inevitable. The girls started eyeing my dresser. Now, you don't know me well, but I do have a heart. So when I could tell how much they wanted it, I said, "It's okay, you can take it," and I got off of this dresser. And just as I was walking to my bike and about to turn around to give it one last wave, I heard someone yell, "Vamos!" And I turned around. I didn't even think it was directed at me, but looked instinctively. And there was the mom pointing to her car for me to get in. I was rusty on my high school Spanish, but I knew what vamos meant, and she said it again, "Vamos." Me? Sí, I take you home. So I looked in the car. Is there room? Sí, I leave them. She was pointing to her children. This woman was offering to leave her kids on the corner to drive a stranger home with her beloved dresser. The kids seemed completely unfazed, so I figured it was just something that they did, and I got in the car. So just a moment into our ride, she pointed to her back window and looked at me with sort of a loaded glance, and I looked back and said, "How did your window break?" And she took a deep breath and exhaled a story that she had clearly been wanting to tell. Her English was far better than my Spanish, but we still had to be creative in our interactions, using gestures and making multiple attempts at the same sentence. But somewhere between hearing the words thief and bolsa and some other context clues, I realized that her car had been broken into just the day before and that her purse was stolen. Then she pointed to herself. No citizen. She was also undocumented, so there was just a whole nother set of barriers that she was telling me about related to getting her ID replaced. Language barrier aside, I barely knew what to say. But I listened, and I listened carefully. And as I did that, I sort of settled into the vulnerability that landed us both in this particular bizarre moment together. And between talking about stories of our children and our neighborhood and shared hatred of cold weather, I had almost forgotten entirely that there was a dresser in the back seat. But when we pulled up to my house, she helped me load it all the way inside, and we got back into the car to go to where my bike and, her kids were. But at that point, I insisted that she let me repay her in some way for her time and her kindness, and she resisted. No, yo soy cristiana. She was a Christian. Didn't know how to argue with that. But I continued to think of something that I could do to show my gratitude. And at the same time, I could feel her sort of shifting in her seat, like she had something else she wanted to say, until eventually she said, well, and I remember hearing the buzzwords tarea and inglés, and remembering from earlier in our conversation that she had been taking an English class. And so I barely even let her finish her request before saying, yes, I would love to help you with your English homework, and I can do that. So we arrived back to the corner where we'd met. At this point, her kids were sitting on a couch that had since been moved to the curb for giveaway. And we sat down beside them, the four of us in a row, and worked through her assignment together. And when I think back on that day, when I see my dresser every day, I still think of that woman and that day. And I realized that there was no piece of furniture that was ever going to make me feel settled in the way that I was looking for, but really that it's the connections with people that make a place feel like home. Thank you.